The story opens on a rainy night in the city of Erlington, where two highly skilled officers, Detective Michael Carter and Inspector James Hughes, are investigating a mysterious murder. Michael, known for his sharp mind and unyielding curiosity, pairs perfectly with James's fierce determination and intuitive instincts. Together, they've solved some of the city's toughest cases. But tonight, they are about to encounter something far more sinister. The rain drizzled against the glass windows of Michael's apartment. His phone buzzed, breaking the comforting silence of the late hour. It was James. "Michael, we've got something." His voice was curt, a mix of urgency and controlled calm. He knew that tone. Something serious had happened. Michael grabbed his coat and headed out into the cold, wet night. At 2 a.m., the streets were deserted, and the only noise was the rain hitting the pavement. Yellow police tape marked off an alley where a body had been found. As Michael arrived, James was already there, standing next to the forensic team. The victim is Richard Bell, a local attorney. Cause of death: single stab wound to the chest. But James hesitated. Something's off. Michael raised an eyebrow, peering down at the body. Richard's face looked peaceful. Too peaceful for a man who had been stabbed. His hand was clutching something, a small piece of paper. The note read, "Find me before it's too late." Michael's eyes narrowed. He looked up at James. This isn't just a murder, it's a message. As the night wore on, Michael and James worked tirelessly, piecing together the victim's last hours. Richard had no known enemies, no troubled past. He had spent his evening at his office, left at 11 p.m., and never made it home. What bothered Michael was the precision of the stab wound, straight to the heart, as if done by someone who knew exactly where to strike. The investigation led them to Richard's law firm, a prestigious establishment located in the city's upscale business district. As they sifted through Richard's files, they stumbled upon a case he had been working on, a high-profile land dispute involving a powerful real estate mogul, Edward Kane. Could Kane be behind this? James asked, flipping through the pages. Michael was thoughtful. Maybe, but it's too obvious. If Kane wanted him dead, why leave a note? The silence in the room was heavy. Then James's phone buzzed again. A second body had been found. Same method, same note. This time the victim was a journalist, Nina Reyes, who had been working on a story connected to Kane's businesses. The connections between the victims were too close to be coincidence. Yet Michael felt the killer was playing with them, almost taunting them. They visited Nina's apartment, hoping to find something that might tie the murders together. What they found was chilling. On her desk was an open laptop, the screen displaying an email titled, "Help me, I'm next." The timestamp was 10:45 p.m., just minutes before her death. James's voice was thick with frustration. She knew she was in danger. Michael's eyes scanned the room, focusing on the small details. The chair was slightly askew, and there was a faint smell of perfume mixed with something else, something metallic. His eyes darted to a small cabinet under the desk. Inside, he found a single, neatly wrapped parcel. Opening it, they discovered a tape recorder with a note attached. "For your ears only." Back at the precinct, Michael and James listened intently as the tape began to play. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear. I am the voice in the shadows, the one they ignored. Richard and Nina were only the beginning. You won't catch me, because you don't even know what you're looking for. Michael leaned back, his mind racing. This is bigger than Kane. This person, they're targeting people connected to something much deeper. James nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. But what? They combed through the victims' lives, looking for a common thread. And then, it hit them. Both Richard and Nina had been involved in a decade-old case, a corruption scandal that had rocked the city but had been swept under the rug. The people who had silenced the truth were being silenced in return. As dawn approached, Michael and James felt the weight of the killer's game pressing down on them. They were close, but the killer was always a step ahead. Then, James's phone rang. A voice, low and menacing, whispered on the other end. "Tick-tock, detective. Time's running out." The line went dead. Michael's eyes met James's, and for the first time that night, there was something they both felt: fear. Not for themselves, but for whoever might be next. The killer wasn't done yet, and the clock was ticking as they prepared for the next phase of the investigation. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. His eyes landed on the map of the city, dotted with the locations of the murder. As they prepared for the next phase of the investigation, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. His eyes landed on the map of the city, dotted with the locations of the murders. And then it clicked. The locations weren't random. They formed a pattern. Each murder site, when connected on the map, was pointing towards the city's old courthouse, where the corruption case had been first tried and then dismissed. The killer wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. They were waiting. The rain was still coming down in sheets as Michael and James pulled up outside the courthouse, a towering, decaying building on the edge of town. Its once grand facade was now a ghost of its former self, weathered by years of neglect. The windows were dark, and the entire place exuded an air of foreboding. "This is where it all started," James muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "The case that never saw the light of justice." Michael stepped out of the car, the rain instantly soaking through his coat. "And this is where it ends." They approached the building, guns drawn, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. The door was ajar, as if inviting them inside. The interior of the courthouse was worse than they imagined. Dust covered the floors, cobwebs hung from the ceilings, and the once majestic courtroom now stood as a crumbling monument to forgotten secrets. Michael scanned the room, his eyes catching the remnants of an old case file on the judge's bench. He picked it up carefully. Inside were familiar names: Richard Bell, Nina Reyes, and a third name, unknown to them, Dr. Alan Ross. James glanced over his shoulder. "Who's Ross?" Michael's brow furrowed. "I don't know, but if this file is in here, it means he's next." As they continued their search, the unmistakable click of a door echoed through the empty courthouse. They exchanged a tense glance and followed the sound, heading deeper into the dark corridors of the building. The corridors led them to an old courtroom basement, where they found a single chair in the center of the room, a reel-to-reel table placed neatly on a nearby table. The red light blinked ominously. Michael hesitated, then hit play. The familiar, distorted voice filled the room, sending chills down their spines. "You're here. Good. You're smarter than the others. But not by much. Dr. Ross is waiting, but not for long. Tick-tock." James clenched his fists. "We're being played." Michael stared at the recorder. "Maybe, but we're going to end it tonight." As they prepared to leave the basement, a faint sound caught Michael's attention. It was coming from behind the walls, a tapping sound. He and James exchanged a look, then followed the noise to a hidden door behind a stack of old law books. With a firm push, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit staircase descending into darkness. At the bottom of the staircase, they found a small, cold room. In the center of it sat Dr. Alan Ross, bound to a chair, barely conscious. His face was pale and his breathing shallow. But they weren't alone. Standing behind him, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man wearing a dark coat, his face partially obscured by the flickering light. His expression was calm, almost serene. "You've finally arrived," the man said softly, his voice calm but laced with menace. Michael's grip tightened on his weapon. "Let him go," the man smirked. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about him. It's about justice." James stepped forward. "Justice? You're a murderer." The man's expression darkened. "I'm what this city needed. Richard, Nina, Ross, they were all part of it. They were the ones who buried the truth, who let the corruption rot this city from the inside. And now they've paid the price." Michael took a step closer. "You think killing them fixes that? You're just another criminal hiding behind excuses." The man's eyes flashed with anger. "They were the criminals. I'm the executioner." Before Michael or James could react, the man reached into his coat, pulling out a detonator. His finger hovered over the button. "Don't do it," James shouted, but the man's smile returned, cold and unforgiving. "I warned you, Detective." Tick-tock. In a split second, the room erupted into chaos. Michael lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground just as he pressed the detonator. A deafening explosion rocked the building, sending debris raining down around them. James scrambled to his feet, dragging Dr. Ross out of the room as flames began to spread through the basement. Michael, still grappling with the man, managed to disarm him, pinning him to the ground as the fire raged around them. "You're done," Michael growled, breathing heavily. The man laughed even as he lay defeated. "Am I? Or is this just the beginning?" Michael didn't respond, tightening the handcuffs around the man's wrists. He and James dragged the killer out of the burning building just as fire trucks and backup arrived on the scene. Outside the courthouse, Dr. Ross was rushed to the hospital and the killer was loaded into the back of a police van. As the doors slammed shut, Michael and James stood in the rain, watching as the fire consumed the courthouse behind them. James ran a hand through his wet hair. "What do you think he meant by just the beginning?" Michael stared at the flames, his mind racing. "I don't know, but something tells me we haven't seen the last of this." James nodded solemnly. "We'll be ready." As the sun began to rise, the storm finally started to clear. The courthouse lay in ruins, but the truth had been uncovered. Corruption had led to these deaths, and justice had been served. But there was an unsettling feeling in the air, a sense that the darkness still lingered in the city of Erlington. For now, Michael and James had won, but they knew the game wasn't over.
Please subscribe and follow. See you in next video.